All right, welcome back to another edition of What Cosell is Watching. And on this particular edition, we'll talk about something that came out in mid-December on ESPN, focusing in on the legendary Reggie White, the 30 for 30, called the Minister of Defense. Now, everyone knows about Reggie White. After a star-studded All-American career at the University of Tennessee, he spent the bulk of this all-time great career in Philadelphia and then Green Bay, although it has to be noted he began his career in the USFL as a Memphis showboat. Okay, but this is the thing about Reggie White. He truly is one of the all-time, not just great defensive linemen, but pure overall football players. I would actually guess that if you were going to do an all-time draft of a team, he would be among the very first picks. And I remember NFL Network several years ago did top 100 players of all time. Jerry Rice was number one. I believe Jim Brown was number two. Number 7 was Reggie White. And you just take a look at the sheer numbers and the accomplishments that he crafted over this career. 10-time All-Pro, not Pro Bowl, 10-time All-Pro, 13 Pro Bowls in total, and 198 sacks. But I don't think the numbers or the accomplishments really speak to the impact he had. Reggie White, in my view, when you talk to people that actually played him, will tell you that he had the most natural strength of any human being that they have ever faced, and that he could lift people up with that forklift move of his and that forearm shiv. And here's where I think Reggie White separates himself from any defensive lineman that ever played. He could play inside off the edge. He could play right over the nose. He could play defensive tackle. He could play in a 3-man front, a 4-man front, any type of system. You plug in Reggie White anywhere on that front line, and he, at the very least, would be a Pro Bowl caliber player. There's not a lot of guys like that, because many of them are specific to a scheme and a style of play. Okay, that's what we know about Reggie White. The impact he also made, and this was pointed out, was that he was one of the first big-name free agents in football. And when he went to the Green Bay Packers, I don't think people realize how big that was back in 1993. Because back then, Green Bay, especially to a lot of black players, was Siberia. In fact, they used to threaten a lot of players like, hey, you don't start acting right, you're going to Green Bay. And guys would start to behave a lot better. And for him to do that, change the perception of that franchise culturally. And now it's known as one of the glamour franchises, and you don't hear a lot of players saying, I don't want to go to Green Bay. In fact, they seem to welcome and enjoy their experience in Lamboville. A couple of things here. So Reggie White was very, very religious, as you could tell by the title and his nickname, the Minister of Defense. And I still remember as a kid, he was incredibly out front about his religious beliefs, his Christianity, and he had no problems. He was so out front about it, a lot of people were uncomfortable with it, but he said, hey, I am a man of God, and I'm a man of the cloth, and I'm going to spread the word. And there would be events where his teammates would be around, and he'd make it clear, if we're going out to dinner, there can be no alcohol. But in his later years, and I remember NFL films that he featured on this, he started to question his own faith and his beliefs. And he asked, was I used by Christianity to spread a false message? And he began this journey of actually learning to read and to understand Hebrew. And it's really interesting that he actually died just a few months after that feature on NFL Films was produced back in 2004. In fact, he died at the age of 43. So he left us very, very young. And I often wonder, if he was not taken from us so early, where would he be right now in his spiritual journey? And where would his religious beliefs stand at this time? Another controversy, I'll never forget, and we used to make fun of this all the time, when he talked about the cultural differences and the beauty of all races, colors, and creeds in God's eyes. And he made some generalizations. He said stuff like Asians can turn a watch into a VCR, talking about our supposed intelligence and the ability to create technology. Certain people got offended. I think that was unfair because, in my view, he was only trying to highlight the specific strengths of each culture and that how we all contribute to the world. But of course, this is like the beginning of political correctness, where you could not take statements like that and just take them for what they were. He meant no harm. And as an Asian, I have no problems him thinking that we could turn a Swatch watch into a Magnavox Beta. Okay, now here's the one quibble that I had with this work, because I thoroughly enjoyed it. LZ Granderson, best known for his work at ESPN, is a gay black man, and I'm still trying to figure out why was he a part of this, other than to complain that a man like Reggie White did not agree with his lifestyle, because he is gay, which is fine. I have no issues with it. Reggie White came out back then in the late 80s and said, I'm against that. It's not what the Bible says. It's not right. Whether you agree or disagree or not, the bottom line is Reggie White has a right to his set of beliefs, and he's allowed to evolve his beliefs over time. Now, LZ Granderson actually said something to the effect that comments made by people like Reggie White put him in danger. I think that's a load of hogwash. I think that's grandstanding. That's a straw man argument. Reggie White does not have to agree with Granderson's lifestyle, and not only that, he does not have to endorse it. And what I am seeing now in modern culture is that particular community is not only demanding acceptance, they're asking you to be indoctrinated and almost to be a part of it. My view is this: whether we agree or disagree with any lifestyle or set of cultural beliefs, whether it's sexual and whether it's about hereditary beliefs or your sex, male or female, all we have to do is allow you to exist and not infringe upon your rights. And for LZ Granderson to actually grandstand the way he did, I just felt as though that was over the top and almost unfair, given the fact that Reggie White is no longer here to defend himself. But overall, if you grew up in my era or you appreciate the National Football League or the game of football, I think you'll enjoy it. So I want to wrap this up here. Here's the all-time Korean Cosell defensive line. Okay? And these are the best four guys that I would say if I had to win one football game and my life was on the line, these would be my war daddies up front. One of my defensive ends would have to be the Secretary of Defense, the man who coined the term sack, and I think was at least one generation ahead of his time athletically. The great David Deacon Jones, one of the leaders of the fearsome foursome. He was spectacular. He could have played in any era and got 15 sacks a year for a full decade. And then my other end would be Bruce Smith. Now, this is the amazing part about Bruce Smith, who had over 200 sacks. He was actually a 3-4 end. And if you talk to people that really know football, being a 3-4 end is different than being a 4-3 edge guy, and you don't get to do that wide stuff. He actually had to run through more people to get to the quarterback, and to this day, I still believe he is the prototypical edge defensive end in terms of pass rushing that you'll ever see. Then also inside, I got to go with Mean Joe Green. He was the epicenter of the Steel Curtain and one of the greatest players that ever was. And without him being drafted by the Steelers, I don't think the Chuck Noll dynasty ever really takes off quite the way it did. And who can forget the Coke commercial? That made him iconic, so that puts him over the top. And inside, I will pair him with the great Reggie White. I think this was a no-brainer, and as I said, I know Reggie played a lot on the edge, but he also played a little bit inside. So there it is, my all-time defensive line. It's Deacon Jones, Bruce Smith, Mean Joe Green, and the Minister of Defense, Reggie White. And that's it for this edition of What Cosell is Watching.
If you enjoyed that video, be sure to hit the like button and subscribe so you never miss a moment of Fearless.